So welcome to What Do You Know, the Knowledge of a Knowledge Audit. We are thrilled to have Joe and Charles here. I'll be introducing them shortly, but first off, this is going to be the agenda. This is where we're going to be, and I'll be giving you guys check-ins before we start each part. Additionally, I think it's important for you guys to know we'll be sending out this deck tomorrow, so don't feel like you have to take furious notes. We will also have a cheat sheet available at the end of this that we will be sending out tomorrow, but you'll also be able to download it immediately. So with that in mind, it is time for introductions. I'm Leah Friedman. I am a Senior Content Marketing Manager here at Guru, and I am thrilled to be here with Charles Drupe and Joe Hosteler. Would you guys like to say anything?
Joe, you wanna...
I'm gonna put one extra T in my name there. I will just say I've clearly Joe Hosteler at Square. I've been here for 5 years. Been leading training for account management for 3. And I'm super passionate about knowledge management. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about this today.
I'm Charles Drupe. I am the Sales Content Manager here at Square. I am in charge of administrating internal knowledge base content as well as external content that goes out to the people that we sell to. So very excited to have all of you here, and hopefully you'll learn a lot and take away from this webinar.
All right, so I think it's also important to point out that Joe and Charles recently went through a knowledge audit at Square. So we're going to be talking quite a bit about their story and the learnings that they encountered along the way. So number 1, how to know when you need a knowledge audit. Take it away, guys.
So I'll take care of this first slide here. I think for the most part, everyone has really good intuition in terms of when you need something fixed, right? You don't fix something if it's not broken. But we're going to help you understand what are some of those red flags that will allow you to say, you know, we can't push this off any longer, right? These are some of the things that Square really went through. So the first one is going to be user-based changes. Both the teams that me and Joe represent grew very rapidly. In addition to that too, not only did our teams grow, external contributor teams grew, and external teams wanted in with anything that had to do with Guru. So we had a lot of other sales teams in different functions join us. So the thing that's really tough about this is, you know, you open the gates to people come in, and there's really hard distinction between who owns the content, who is contributing, and then also those who consume it. So the more people you let in, and if you don't have oversight on what they're doing and what they're adding, it's going to be a bit tough.
To add also some, oh, go ahead, Charles.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean it. I was just going to say to add some numbers to this. So in about 3 years, our account management team had grown from about 30 people to now 100. And I would say that sales probably scale at the same rate.
So for us, we grew up to 200 users. And then, of course, we added on 3 other teams who have their own teams going.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, with all of these other teams adding into it, we got a lot of duplicates. We worked in silos where the account management team had the same product cards. The sales team had their own product cards with their own notes. And there's a lot of inconsistent formatting, which meant that some of these cards of the same topic were actually have their own pros and their own cons. So those are a couple of flags that we saw there. And Joe will speak a little bit more on the other parts.
Yeah. So I think, was it okay for me to go to this slide, or do you want me to?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, let's keep going.
So I think some of the things that we've talked about right now, just in a minute, user-based changes and confusing content can lead to, Joe.
Definitely a lack of trusted content. You'll probably hear this as we go through this presentation, but you know, you'll hear rumblings from the team. Sometimes, you know, I remember I had a couple of account managers changing teams, and so they came into account management and just felt like our knowledge base wasn't useful. And so that was a flag. Aside from teams, you know, whether using the content, right? Also, you'll notice teams will, be asking, there's a lot of chatter in Slack channels and in email. And those are all flags that you should pay attention to. Also, in any learning organization, you want folks to, you want to teach folks how to fish. And so that means that you need to give them, a good pond to fish from.
Yeah. A good red flag, to sum that up too, is if you're having troubles with internal communications and the sharing of information, it is time to audit your knowledge base. Again, as Joe stated, lots of people asking questions on Slack, lots of people asking each other at desks. So just reiterating how important that is as red flags to look out for.
Yep. So just to recap, it is when people stop using your knowledge base that you need a knowledge audit. So let's move on to where to start and what to look for, because I know that this can be a pretty daunting seeming task, especially when you have things like duplicate content, a large proliferation of content. So how did you guys start?
Yeah, Joe actually approached our team, or me specifically, and we were just like, okay, we cannot do this any longer. You and I have been working on Guru for the past 2 years together. How do we then take a step back and take a look at that? So Joe, do you want to talk a little bit more about kind of where we started the conversations and how we were saying, okay, this is the vision for this audit?
Yep. So my lead actually came to me one day and said, I think Guru's on fire. She had heard rumblings on the team that there was a lot of duplicate content, kind of what we've already gone through. Information wasn't accessible, so on and so forth. And so I decided to audit at least account management's knowledge base. I shared that with the sales enablement team, Charles's team, and they said, oh my gosh, we need the same thing. And so we decided we would combine efforts, created a collaboration doc. We'll talk about stakeholder management on that in a minute. But really made sure we, informed leadership and everybody on each team and end users on the work that we were doing in order to gain buy-in. Mm-hmm. And that was clearly spelled out in a multi-page document with great detail as to what challenges we were dealing with and what we were going to do tactically and strategically to address them.
Yeah, and so actually double clicking on that, taking a step back. So, you want to get things done right and done quickly. And for the most part, especially if you are managing a knowledge bases and you have leads above you saying, hey, let's get this done quickly, let's just push something out. It's really hard to push back and say, well, I'm going to need a couple of months to do this. So there's a couple of things that you can do or keep in mind when you're having these conversations, right? So when you've identified that you need to audit your knowledge base, the first thing you want to do is be super clear about those pain points and the effect that it has. It really has to do at the end of the day of lack of efficiency and not being able to find the information you have. Therefore, it reduces the quality of either the phone calls that you have as well as the day-to-day lives of your reps or your team. The second is you really have to be clear about the plan and how long it will take alone. Hopefully the cheat sheet that you'll get from this webinar is going to help you understand the amount of things that you'll need to get done. And then if you say, okay, let's say that I need 1 to 2 quarters to get this done by myself. If you want it faster, what kind of resources can you help to help provide this? So on our team, Joe did an amazing job at this to take a look at the leads and say, hey, we need our account management force to help. We need someone from sales enablement and sales to help with this. So we got that buy-in from our leads. And then finally, again, reiterating over and over that not getting it done really does have this long-term impact. Not only in the efficiency of your reps, but also the time that you're putting in. You're gonna have to double that time a year from now, if not triple it, because it's grown so much and you didn't have the right foundation set.
I think that also this is a really important one. Number 2, remember what the function of your knowledge base is. Before you jump into any audit, when you take that step back, think about what is it that you've invested in a knowledge base for in the first place, right? And that is to be a living single source of truth, to remove ambiguity and to get people the answers they need quickly, which goes back to that idea, right, that if people aren't using it, all of these functions have kind of collapsed.
Yeah, and keep in mind if you have, say, a you know, Square has clearly squareup.com/help, our support center that's publicly available, right? To be clear, we're talking about our internal knowledge base, so sales
Yes.
enablement materials, discovery questions, you know, case studies, all of that. And so, you know, their duplication can exist in a couple of ways. It could be a duplicate against your support center. It could be different single sources of truth for different teams. If you're using Guru, you know, we found that we had different knowledge bases for each team. And so the source of truth on sales was different from account management, which was an indicator to us that we should reduce those redundancies, and you know, another indicator that we should work together on the project.
Yeah, and I think on top of that too is when you're trying to figure out how to do this audit and trying to figure out who does the single source of truth actually benefit, it always has to be your viewers. It has to be the day-to-day users that you have. And it is extremely easy for leads, for the people who are contributing to put their voice in and say, hey, we need the process to change to make it easier for us. Or we need this process to change because of other plans that we have. At the end of the day, you need to be looking out for your viewers, not the other people who are participating, because they are the ones that you're trying to make more efficient.
So let's talk about those different kinds of knowledge consumers. And how do you build a knowledge base that works for the people who are your core users?
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit about this. So we kind of broke it down to 3 different groups, right? Because when you have a lot of teams growing and joining in, you're opening up the floodgates and you don't know who's adding users. And of course, when it comes to finances, right, who is actually going to be paying for these seats? With that said, we really honed it down to 3 groups. One are core users. So particularly, there's about 4 teams that are really looking day to day into this information. So these are your knowledge consumers. There's essential contributors. So these are folks that may be in your team, such as subject matter experts, but there can also be subject matter experts outside of your team. For example, your product managers, product marketing managers, who are relaying a lot of this information out to the public that also needs to be relayed to you with more information. And then we have auxiliary users and auxiliary contributors. So these are people who access it for reference once in a while, but then also need to know information or contribute information, but then they'll be gone, you know, in a month. So these could possibly be folks from product who are launching a new product, giving this information, and then after a month, they're not using it anymore. So really the great part about this is you get a very clear understanding of how many users you have. It limits the amount of admittance to people who don't really need it. And it gives you, again, a better vision about who are your prime users and who are you advocating for with this knowledge audit.
Yep. We have a quick question from chat. Can you tell us a little bit more about how Square utilizes collections? Is it by department team? Did specific features like board sharing, for example, help you uncover issues that led to the audit? I think we can definitely spend a minute or two just talking about this.
I can go ahead and take that first. And I'll kind of give you the contrast. So when we first adopted Guru, we were using an account management collection and then a sales collection. And then we had a shared content collection that had stuff like competitor content, shared processes, finance processes, that kind of thing. In the post-audit, or as I say, the new world order, we have now a shared product collection. And then we have a competitor collection, a partnership collection. And then we still have, much more thoughtfully so, but still have individual team collections that are team specific content like processes and policies that, you know, we know only, you know, sales will use or only account management will use. And yes, board sharing is going to be really helpful. Especially in authorship, in order to govern kind of that new world order and ensure that it's not, you know, the wild, wild west of editing, which is, you know, kind of the world we found ourselves in prior to the audit.
Yeah, and it depends too, when you do the board sharing, it's good to figure out how many different teams are you sharing this board with? Is there sensitive information in this board? If if there is no sensitive information and you have multiple teams asking for it, then that's when you start thinking, oh, is there a shared collection that should have all of this information to have? And who are we going to add as a verifier contributor so that there's one single source of truth for everyone here?
Sorry, guys. Just inadvertently pressing things. Okay. So I think another aspect here when we're talking about all of this is scale. So I know you guys talked a bit about how your user base grew quite a bit. So how did you think about how that architecture would scale as you continue to grow?
You know what? I would love to pose a question with our participants today and attendees. Could you put it in the chat of how many users you have and how many you plan on growing in the next year? I want you to really take 10 seconds to think about the future of your knowledge base right now. So we'd love to see what kind of participants we have as well, so that maybe we can help to hone in a little bit on kind of our learnings for the type of teams that you'll have. So
yeah, I'll also add
more.
too while we wait for that. Like, I think when 3 years ago, Square was a very different company even than it is now, right? That's the case with any hyper growth company. And so I think we thought prior to our audit, well, we'll just let people edit content where they're a subject matter expert and like it'll be fine. Not anticipating really how much people are going to contribute, and then kind of some people will go rogue, and we needed to really do more thoughtful work up front on usership and grouping and who has authorship access and who doesn't, and just controlling the influx of content to keep inflation at bay.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Wow, we're getting a lot kind of all over the place. So we've got some folks who are starting small, under 100. We've got 100 to 150, some going into thousands or hundreds, right? So there's a lot of people here in various groupings. And so when you think about the knowledge architecture that will scale, as Joe mentioned, really think about who are going to be the collection admins, who are going to be the verifiers and source of truth for shared information, and then figuring out, and we'll go into this later, I promise, but it's about very clear external guidelines on the ROE of your guru instance. That
Devil is
so
in the
important.
Details, folks. Devil is in the details.
It really is. So if you're like us, where we went from 150 users to now over a little bit under 500 users, and more so as we go on, it's really important to have that architecture of who owns what, who is administrating what, and then also create a culture where all of you can come in and say, let's have meetings about this so that every collection administrator understands what the processes are. We'll go into that in more detail later.
All right, I'm just going to move us along a little bit so that we can get through all of this. I think this is also a really important point. I think they're all important points. I'll preface it by saying that. But I mean,
we already spoke to this a little bit as well.
Okay.
Yep.
But yeah, buy-in is huge. And I saw that another question came in about new in the role and the knowledge base is a mess. I'm not sure how the team feels about my predecessor, so I'm trying to be tactful, but every help doc needs to be revised. How can I launch a discrete overhaul? Where should I start? And I think the goal here really is transparency. And buy-in is something necessary in order to move forward.
Yeah, I think also Charles, the cheat sheet that we'll provide at the end can give you a lot of back-end work to maybe build a proof of concept to share with your leadership and say, this is the current state, here's what I'd like the future state to look like. And hopefully that will help with buy-in.
Great. So again, you want to know why the patient died, you have to perform an autopsy. So ask these hard questions now to set yourself up for future success, because that's how you learn and grow. So we started to talk a bit about scale. So let's dive right into that. What a knowledge audit looks like for teams and organizations of different sizes. So, we know that every team, every company is going to be different, but there are some universal truths that Charles and Joe can speak to. Because again, it's about the size that you expect to be, not necessarily about the size you are right now.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the different sizes. I think we touched upon this, so we won't go too much into it. But again, it's really important for you to know how much more you're going to scale and then how many teams you're going to scale with. So it's a little bit easier when it's just your team. If you're a sales team that's growing from 500 to 1,000 next year, great. You probably already know the different buy-in that you have with your leaders. However, it's also important to note who are going to be resources on your team that's going to help you update and also advocate for the culture. Same thing goes for external team members who are going to be the administrators there. So start thinking about what that buy-in looks like from a lot of different team leads. And yeah, if you guys have any more questions about that, let us know.
Also, I have to say I'm envious of those who are at teams of 15 now. My goodness. I wish we had done this when we were that size. So please learn from our mistakes. We are definitely doing the level of detailed work that we should have been doing in implementation of Guru, right? So hopefully you can, again, learn from our mistakes.
But so regardless of team size, whether you're a team of 15 now or where Joe is envious of you, or you're a larger team, what's the deal with content, as Jerry Seinfeld might say?
And so, yeah, so Joe, do you want to, you kind of really took the helm in terms of looking at the content, how we were deduplicating, how we were architecting it. Do you want to talk a little bit about like, what was it that was accessed most often? How do we figure out the core essential content that we wanted to focus on?
Yeah, there were a few things. So if you guys are not using a platform where you're able to identify if content is being accessed or not, run, don't walk to such a platform. You need to know whether or not your content is being used. So we do use Guru. It has super robust analytics. And so there was no question for us as to what content we could trim and what content was really useful and we should keep. We also actually did an end user survey. And there were about 40 or 50 responses to it. So it was super helpful in designing what our future state would look like. And, down to, sections of cards and what was useful and what wasn't in the current world order. And we kind of trimmed from there. Keep in mind, if you are able to determine like whether or not users are viewing your content and, what was our rule of thumb, Charles? Like if it has less than 20 views in the last year,
3 months, yeah. Even just like last 3 months, right? Is it actually that helpful? It also really depends. You want to note this down. It's like, when was the article or the card made? Because that's really something to think about. Like, oh, if this is just put in, we want to make sure that we keep that in mind. If we're going to archive a bunch of cards that have low performance, it could just be because they were doing that. And Guru has a really great way with Card Manager where you can set it as a filter of any cards that are past, let's say 90 days. So that way you can filter out those newer cards.
Yeah, and Leah's asking about the end user survey. It was really just, some of the questions were, how easy do you find it to access information in Guru? We gave them a sample card. We have a kind of general product overview card that has a few key components of each product, and then those can link out to other cards. And so we asked them, what sections of this card are most useful to you in your day-to-day? Those kinds of questions really helped us.
Cool. So, a couple of things in terms of the content here that we kind of want to look into. It's focusing on the content that isn't accessed, or that is accessed and that isn't accessed. If it's accessed, you want to focus in on what is actually the right formatting that is most useful to your reps. That's a big part of that survey. What isn't helpful for them, figure out either to deduplicate or to archive if it's not being used. Additionally, too, we found, again, as we said earlier, we had different siloed collections. There was a lot of content in those collections that were shared with account management, with Square payroll, sales reps, etc. So how are you going to bring those in, deduplicate, and allow access to your users? bringing it back earlier. If you're sharing a board with multiple teams, that is a great signal of whether you want to put that in a shared collection as well. Additionally, too, it's really good to see for cards that are being accessed, what is working? Is it because the formatting is great? Is it because the person who's verifying it, doing it over and over again? These are great themes that you want to note down for the future ROE of how these cards are maintained in the long run, right? So that's kind of some really key points for focusing on the content here.
I will say one more thing too. If you really want to kind of get a grasp on your knowledge base now, authorship, you guys. If your authorship is vast, you're going to have a ton of useless content. I would encourage you to first look at who has access to author the content and maybe create a smaller team of folks that you're able to train well, per a style guide and formatting, because that is really the runaway train. Mm-hmm. I've used that analogy many times on this project, that can take off and really get ahead of you.
Yeah, the way that we did it with ours is we looked at the collections, we looked at the boards in the collections, and we assigned kind of like board leads for those. And so those board leads will help you to really cut down on who is authoring and focusing on who you need to train so that in the future, what is that process of submitting cards, editing cards, and formatting it correctly in the way that your viewers are going to find most useful.
So let's, for a second, because we're about to talk about scalability here, if we're saying maybe pull back on who can author these cards, but you want everyone to have a stake in the knowledge base, how can you kind of draw that contrast without, telling people their knowledge isn't needed?
Yeah, no, that is the balance for sure. We created a few different channels for that. So we created a centralized request process that we're actually using not only between sales and account management, but also our support team, customer success. And so any new content that comes in immediately hits the eyes of all three governors, guru governors, as we call ourselves. And, we can determine whether or not it's relevant to our team. We also have an open hashtag knowledge Slack channel, where anybody, it's company, it's public Slack channel, anybody can ask about content. And then finally, just an email alias. And so with all of those different channels, folks have, multiple ways to reach out to us with new content. And so that is the critical balance, Leah. You hit the nail on the head. Like you want to balance democratization with the Wild Wild West.
And then the last item here, which I think is also directly related to this, is how do you repeat this as you scale it? We've talked about teams of different sizes, but especially as the team starts to grow, how do you repeat those successes once you have everything the way kind of you want it?
Yeah, so I think we found that in our, prior to the knowledge audit, we didn't actually have a designated cadence where we were, reviewing our guidelines, reviewing formatting and our processes to ensure that, we were making iterations along the way. We now will be meeting monthly to talk about those things. And so it is also, yes, I already mentioned this, but our DRIs are our guru governors. And so we all kind of had a stake in the success of, not only the current collection, but also, how we manage the processes going forward.
So again, the balance here is making your knowledge base usable for everyone, but especially the core viewers who access it every day. They are your North Star. They're the ones you are really, really building this for. And when you consider all of the trade-offs and all of the changes that you're gonna have to make, put them front and center. So let's talk about how to set your knowledge base up for ongoing success.
Can I ask for a small pause? Did we answer the question of Kim about additional info on the request process?
No, I didn't even see it. Yes, please. So For those
Go ahead,
who aren't
Charles.
in the chat right now, the question is, could you offer additional info about the request process your team created and why it works?
Yes, so as Joe mentioned earlier, we really worked with our customer success team, who actually has a specific person who has their role of just their internal knowledge base coordinator. And so they had a great process wherein it's currently right now, we're going to see how this works in the future, but we have a JIRA process, which is a form where folks are able to enter in, what team they're from, what board or card they want to add or edit, and then also giving access to templates that then they're able to fill out so that those who are receiving those requests are the ones who are just verifying if the information is correct, and then have kind of like those verifiers to be the ones who are publishing that information. The great thing about this is that you can check whether the quality is good, they followed your instructions correctly, and then also make sure that you know who the actual verifier is going to be moving forward so that they can continuously update that information in the process that you've laid out.
And I
So
think it's also,
right now,
sorry, go ahead. I was going to say we had another question come in through Q&A, which I think is related to this as well, but I didn't want to interrupt you as you were continuing to answer the first question.
Yeah, Leah, go ahead.
Okay, the question is, do you have any specific thoughts, strategies, templates surrounding change management during an audit? Once the SMEs are bought in and start work on changing the knowledge, what's your recommended strategy to ensure that the users are prepared for the shift in their old knowledge base? Rome isn't built in a day, so we want to make those awkward middle days as comfortable for users as possible.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, goodness, beautifully written. A few things we're doing here, because we're now actually assigning verification of content, product content, to the product marketing team. We're pushing a video training to all of them, and then we'll have an office hours session if they have questions around what they're doing. As for our end users, they're all fully aware this is underway. We've also crowdsourced quite a bit of help in reformatting and restructuring a lot of the content to make sure we can complete it within a reasonable period of time. And been mentioning over the last several weeks that this is coming. When we publish the new content, we will push to them a video training that tells them here's how to find your knowledge. We actually had end users deliver that video training, which is kind of change management 101, right? We wanted to make sure that the face of the change was the end user. We'll continue to utilize actually those folks that helped us with the knowledge audit. We call them our knowledge audit team, as just a knowledge team going forward. And what else? Am I missing anything, Charles?
No, I think that basically covers a lot of it. Also utilize different, again, internal comms avenues that you have. So on the sales part, we have a sales newsletter that's going to go out. We also will be announcing this and giving a preview of it before launch. Before we launch it, we're going to tell them in a sales team meeting and say, hey, these are the things that you can expect. These are the times where Guru will be down for these updates. And then these are the reasons why we're doing it and how it's going to benefit you. So really, again, being a source of saying these things need to be done for the benefit of the end users, just reiterating that over and over will also get you buy-in the future for any other resources, such as on our end, our knowledge audit team, and then also just like with subject matter experts and DRIs who can help.
And then as we jump into this next section, a question from Kylie. Does your customer support org also utilize Guru, and how did you remedy sources of truth resources between sales and support and product? And we're about to get into kind of governance structure. So do you want to talk about that as we talk about governance, or do you want to answer it right now?
Let's answer the first part. Short answer, no.
Okay.
Customer support does not use it. Their forces are massive compared to our teams. Although they are reviewing whether we do want to centralize everything in one place, which is extremely hopeful because that's just a testament of, one, how great Guru is as a partner for internal knowledge bases, and two, how well we are going to be implementing it and the processes and the importance of centralize everything in one place. We'll talk a little bit more on how to remedy sources of truth between different teams in the governance part of this.
All right, so how to set your knowledge base up for ongoing success. This is where your governance team comes in. So we are going to dive into each of these 4 items, and anything that you want to say before we dive into create easily accessible guidelines. All right.
This GIF is very true, or GIF, if you will.
Right.
Big fan of Law and Order in my house. So let's talk about guidelines. And some of these are going to be in the cheat sheet that we send out after this session. But I think it's really important that, you know, as we talk about codifying knowledge, guidelines should be written down. They definitely should. They cannot be just kind of passed along from person to person, word of mouth wise. If you are creating a transparent and successful knowledge base, guidelines have to be explicitly laid out.
Yeah, and these guidelines need to be accessible both internally and externally. A lot of the people who want to contribute knowledge to your team are likely not going, or many of them are not going to be in your team as well. So as, for example, your product team members who are going to be providing that content, they need to understand how to submit that content, specifically if you're doing a relaunch or a product launch, right?
Yeah. And something that we talk a lot about here at Guru is the idea that you learn and grow, and that you might not get things right the first time. And I think that that's a really important thing to keep in mind, that even as you go, you're going to continue to make refinements to your guidelines. So make it a living document that changes as your company does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add there too. We actually had 3 documents in the end. So first we had a style guide, and that was really our templating instructions that Charles created, which was voluminous. I mean, it was like 45 pages. And no, maybe I'm exaggerating. But very, again, devil is in the details, very detailed guidelines on the different types of cards and how we should structure the content in them. We also created an architecture and accountability document, which outlined each section or board of content and who owns it, who's directly responsible for it. And then lastly, an overarching Guru governance document. Maybe we should combine these someday, Charles. But a Guru governance document that really outlines who verifies like content, how they go about that on each team, who authors content, how to request content, how to request edits to existing content. And so we kind of had all 3 of those, and we will continue per Leah's remark there to iterate on those.
Yeah, we currently have them in one folder in Google Drive, which is really great.
There you go.
And then we'll be putting them in Guru as well, right? Because that's really important.
Yep.
In addition to that too, what's really important, especially about the guide of each collection and board and who governs it, is that you're going to have attrition. You're going to have people who are going to leave. So you need to be able to take a look at that and say, hey, I feel like this person left. Who's going to take over, right? So just keep that in mind.
I'm just jumping ahead because we are going to talk about this, but just
I
jumping
was just
ahead.
going to say that's such an important point. Yeah, absolutely. That should be a great litmus test for you in creating these guidelines. If somebody walks in and is hired tomorrow and is doing the work that you're doing, do they know exactly what to do and how to do it?
Yeah, and this point 4 here on how to set your knowledge base up for success. This is probably one of the most important things here, is that ensuring that governance is tied to a role and not a person. As many of you are here, you have career goals. Your role right now is not one that you're going to want to be in forever. And so what that means is that you need the buy-in of, we are lucky because we have enablement teams, meaning that our roles have set guidelines. And for me specifically, as a sales tools and content manager, it's part of my specific responsibilities to make sure that our internal knowledge bases are administered and well kept in partnership with other governors, right? And so you'll actually find this in the cheat sheet that we have of example things that you can work into the role that either you have or someone in the future you'll have, to just really put that in kind of just the role responsibilities list. So it should always be foundational to an enablement role if you have one. And it really should be a core way to show leadership. On our sales team, people who help with the internal knowledge base and the information we have, that is a requirement for them to get promotions. That is a requirement for them to become managers. If they are not participating in making sure that this knowledge is in one place, they're not considered, right? They're not considered towards these next level things. So that's a really great way for you to also create that culture, asking your leads to say, in order for you to become, that next level of being a sales rep or a customer success team lead, right? Account manager, senior, et cetera, you need to be able to provide this knowledge so that it doesn't become tribal.
Yeah, I will also add to that. If you have challenges with your leadership in gaining buy-in for a content role, think about who is already contributing to that knowledge base. Oftentimes it ends up falling back into the hands of revenue generating people or managers of revenue generating people. I mean, if we assume that they each spend 5% of their time on creating content, not only back that out to advocate for the role, but back out the revenue they could have been generating with that 5% of their time.
I'm going to back to train for the right things for a quick minute, because we also got a question in, how do you encourage users to create and or suggest content which requires authorship ability, but then have a clear review process for newly created content? I find this challenging when authors also have verification abilities. So I think this is really about making sure that people are using the knowledge base correctly, and that everyone can advocate for using the knowledge base correctly. So let's talk about this question. You looked very excited, Joe.
I will say templates within Guru is going to be really, really helpful with this.
And I will just jump in and say that card templates are a feature that we just released yesterday.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, really excited.
Thank you, Nora and team, for building that.
Yes, that will help with, definitely help with ensuring kind of the integrity of the contents there, right? So Charles's style guide, I don't want to speak for Charles, but his style guide is available in Google Docs to external team members. And so as like product teams, folks who do not directly use Guru day to day to access knowledge, it's actually available to everybody. And so we, as part of our training for them, will ask them to format that and then submit it. Our guidelines are to format the content, hopefully ahead of time, and then submit it. If they don't have the bandwidth to do that, then it's just going to take us longer to publish it, right? That's the trade-off. And verification is simply to verify truth of content. Part of our cadence in monitoring this, we'll be looking back at those changes to content and authorship. And if someone's going rogue, then we'll address that. Anything you want to add to that, Charles?
Yeah, and I think a really big part of this too, again, is creating that culture of making sure that you have multiple people holding them accountable, right? So for example, in our teams, we have DRIs, otherwise known as in-team subject matter experts. So they are working directly with a product manager, right? If they want to put things in, we'll say, hey, DRIs, make sure that when they are requesting these things, you're telling them how to access, where to do that submission process. And two, make sure that it is relevant for you as a sales rep. Or a customer success rep, right? It needs to be formatted in a way that's helpful for you. So if there's information in there that is really just fluff, you have to be a guide in terms of what information is necessary to put in.
Yeah. So I think another thing is just to continue confronting the issues that got you in trouble in the first place, right? Part of being an advocate is being on the lookout for these issues. So if you see people suddenly stop using your knowledge base, right? If they start asking questions in Slack again, if if everyone starts shoulder tapping, you know, that is when you know that you might have another problem. So I think numbers 2 and 3 also really go together in that respect.
They definitely do. And we highly recommend that you have meetings, and I know Joe and I are going to be holding this with each one of our collection administrators to just say, hey, what is the status of your collection, right? You want to hold them accountable for the cleanliness of that as well. Are you hearing things on your side, right? So we have a partner in Square Payroll who has their own collection. We're going to say, is that helpful for your reps? Are you going through these guidelines yourselves? And then see how we can help one another as resources.
So here we talked about this one quite a bit. And I think Joe touched on this a few minutes ago, but as you grow, you may see the need for a full-time knowledge manager. And that's okay because the benefit really is quantifiable. And I think Joe just gave a great example of how that can be.
One more thing too, when it comes to searchability, and how to quantify that. I don't know if it's okay to do like product endorsements here, but one really random tool we've used on our team is called Timular. It's this multifaceted block, and you turn it on the face of the task that you're doing, and it'll calculate what you're, how much time you're spending on those different tasks. And so that can be really useful to give to your end users and tell them, okay, every time you're searching for content, turn it on its head, right? In order to quantify things. If you don't want to buy that, then clearly a good, someone just observing and using a stopwatch can serve in lieu. I know that our support team has actually done that in trying to quantify time that end users are spending on certain tasks. So a couple of tips there.
Cool. And the last part of this is really the right cadence for future audits. Is there, I think the first question after initial audit, look at your guidance document to tell you what you need to keep an eye on, as always. But really, I think the first question is there a right cadence? And I mean, if you're still going to be a team of 15, the same 15 people, right, in 6 months, unless you're encountering any major issues, maybe not. But if you continue to grow, I think this is when we get into talking about cadences. So Joe or Charles, do you want to talk to these timelines?
Yeah, I feel like there's a correlation between team size as well as how quickly you should be doing this. As Liam mentioned, it's smaller, probably won't need to do as many, right? Unless you have multiple sources of contributors in so many different teams. The bigger that you are, you definitely want something more official and more consistent. So if you're one of those team members who are growing in 5,000 users and you've got maybe 10 teams who all don't really share too much shared information, you're going to want to get in that room with all of those administrators maybe once or, once a quarter, maybe twice a year, to really just, again, ask, how is everything going on people's ends? Maybe we can take a look at your collections, see if there are things that need to be better. And then continuously, and you have to do this, refer to the governance documents that you have to say, these are the guidelines and the standards that we have towards these collections.
Don't let the train run away, folks. This is, again, one of our mistakes early on in adopting Guru.
Cool. So I think also when you look at this kind of on an ad hoc basis as well, really, you don't have to wait for your monthly check-in, right, to say, oh, I think people might be drifting away from best practices. If you see it happening, say something, and then be prepared for kind of a re-architecting of that level. Hopefully it's somewhat confined, right, to a board or a collection, and is not impacting your entire knowledge base. But if it is, then start the whole process over again. And don't be scared of it. Really, you're just trying to make something that works and that can continue to function for you. And as I said before, you might not get it right the first time. That just gives you an opportunity to improve. So we are now kind of at an open Q&A. We did have one question come in, which is, what system is Square's customer service team using for a knowledge base? If you're okay answering that.
Yeah, they're using Salesforce Knowledge because it's free, because they all already have Salesforce licenses. And to add more color, part of the knowledge audit was actually using Guru's Knowledge Sync to sync that support content into our Guru instance. Luckily, it was kind of clear in that like our sales team, sales and account management were using Guru and support was using that. And so there's really not much of a risk of like duplicate content between those two systems because the roles are quite different.
I think kind of looking over some of the other questions that people have submitted previously, how do you kind of make time for this in a, you know, everyone has a ton of stuff going on. Say you don't have a dedicated knowledge manager. How do you decide that rebuilding your knowledge base is going to be a priority? And how do you get that? Like, what is the rationale you can make to someone to get that buy-in?
As a lot of people that's probably watching this right now, Joe and I, this is probably 1/5 to 1/6 of our actual role responsibilities.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of passion for it because it does have a lot of long-term, everyday impact, right? And so I know for us, the very first thing is saying, hey, with these surveys, we get to show our leads to say, this is a good use of our time because it's impacting a lot of people. So I don't know if your teams have this, but we have OKRs, which are basically like quarterly goals, and we add that as an official project in these.
Let's see, Kylie just asked, how did you all dig through the content and really surface duplicates?
Good stuff. Well, there is a duplicate card manager now in Guru. So it helps to basically use its algorithm, such a big word. Basically, it just searches through all the cards in your collection to see whether there are cards with very similar content things in it. You know, that includes the body, that also includes the titles and tags. And if you have those, you can actually just choose with a click to just take away all those duplicates, which I think is really great. And then
yes, it does do that across collections, Kylie.
Yeah.
I'll also add more tactically, we ahead of time when we started the actual work of sifting through all of our content, we had like 1,000 cards. We had 4 team members, these are account managers, AEs, who want to be in the sales enablement world someday, and so it aligns with their career goals, buy-in from their lead to help us. And then our true subject matter experts worked with them. We trained them on how to format and how to reduce duplicates. And then they worked with the subject matter experts to kind of product by product, pare down the content. Delegation. Folks, you cannot go at this alone. Yeah, delegation is going to be key. And, you know, if you can get the buy-in of sales managers for sake of, you know, career growth for end users or really just anybody else, that's, you know, kind of where we went.
Hey, Kylie, it's really interesting too that you're sifting through via spreadsheet exports. A way that you could also do it alternatively, which we didn't really do because it wasn't appropriate, is if you go through each one of those articles or cards that you have, write in the possible tags that you have. So first, try to create a tag library, which we did as well, to make sure that there's consistent tagging across the board. Then on columns right next to it, figure out what tags that are going to capture the essential things of that. Once you do that, then what you could do is then sort it on the tags and kind of see whether there are some similarities between cards and then nix those out. I wouldn't say delete them, just mark them in red because those things might pop up in your deduplicating feature. But that's a really great way to just like figure out what organization it is, what cards can be clumped together. That's also a really great way to, if you don't have a really great categorization, to kind of see what articles, what cards are grouped together based on tags. So working with tags at the very beginning will help you to do that as well.
Yeah,
It's
and
also
just
where the style guide becomes critical. Oh, go ahead, Leah. Sorry.
I was also going to say, if you are working in spreadsheets, something that I've always found helpful is to use conditional formatting to highlight certain phrases and words in specific colors. That can kind of give you a visual just sense of where you might be over-indexed on something or under-indexed on something. So that is just a personal thing that I like to do in spreadsheets, but I think it would be really helpful for you. You were going to say something, Joe. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that's where the style guide comes in too. I want to be clear. We determined up front the different structure we wanted, right? And what card types we wanted. And then we slotted all of our knowledge into those predetermined formats and types of content, right? And so that kind of in and of itself would help reduce duplicates, but it's daunting nonetheless.
Yeah.
One last question that had been submitted earlier that I just want to touch on because you mentioned our knowledge sync. Someone had asked, right now all of our internal knowledge base is scattered throughout Google Docs and a Google Cite resource center. Any recommendations on how to get that all in order to make a transition to Guru? So
this is what we did when we adopted
sync.
Guru. Oh my goodness. This is what we did when we adopted Guru. I mean, we had docs, we had sites, we had Confluence, it was all over the place. This is where I think like executive leadership buy-in is critical, right? That needs to be more top down, and that we are adopting a knowledge base as a single source of truth. Here are all of the benefits across all of these different team members. And then, you got to kind of pull all of that content in. I will be honest, it took probably a year or two to ensure that everyone was bought in on a single source of truth. So we were already scaling quite quickly at that point. So there's a lot of people that we needed that buy-in from. So the earlier, the better you can do that. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
One last question. We are just about out of time, but Support Ops is currently the only team adding, managing, and using Guru. Our customer support advocates are our main users. We want to set this up to expand to other teams across the company. What's your suggestion for encouraging expansion to other teams, but also emphasize the importance of sticking to guidelines and best practices beyond our small team?
I can speak a little bit on this. It's going to be natural if you're doing it correctly, or if people are talking about it, that people want in. Especially for our teams, just in the past year alone, we onboarded 3 to 4 other teams that went on Guru and want access to this. So the best way to get, this is really tough too, because I was speaking with some, members in the Guru community, which has been extremely active. So if you're not on it, hopefully you'll get on it in the future. But we were talking about, how do we get other teams to buy in and using Guru as their like single source of truth? And really thinking about that is, one, understanding how, again, it affects your workflow. And 2, trying to see what the pain points are, again, with shared knowledge. If you can go to a room of people and say, hey, we have all this knowledge that we're sharing. Why isn't it in the same place? Why don't we have, a few people who are really managing this and making sure that the content is correct? Then we are going against efficiencies here, right? Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say go in one room and ask everyone. Go team to team. Ask them what their pain points are. Ask them, hey, it seems like your team has the same information as us, right? So customer support, a lot of that will have to do with sales, with account management, right? Things that you are sharing together. And then also just thinking about, you don't have to get everyone on board at one time to make it impactful. It was over 2.5 years that we got these teams on board. Plus, you want to set this knowledge audit up before you start adding those people. So before you even try to get people on it, make sure you have a system that works. Just my 2 cents, it'll be natural, trust me. People will come in once they hear about how useful Guru is.
All right, the one last thing is, here is your bit.ly link to download the great cheat sheet that Charles here put together. It's bit.ly/audit KB. KB is capitalized. And again, you'll receive this via email tomorrow, but if you really want it today, please enjoy it.
Really great thing about this is that you will get a sneak peek also of all the documentation that we put together. So it'll give you, like, if you want to start somewhere and just be like, I don't know where to start, here's a list of the documents that we want to put together. Bring that to your leads and say, hey, this is the vision and the plan of how we're going to do this audit, what it's going to look like in terms of governance. That will give you a much better pitch in terms of putting time into this, because you know exactly what you need to do.
All right. Well, thank you, especially to Charles and Joe, and to all of you for joining us. It has been an illuminating hour and 3 minutes. Again, please look forward to emails tomorrow containing this deck, a recording of this conversation, and the cheat sheet. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a happy Wednesday.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, folks. Bye.